Huh? Come in here!
One of the funniest movies of the 90s wasn't just about laughs. It was born from a fight to change how the world saw life in the hood. But what most fans never figured out is that behind the comedy were near disasters, hidden feuds, and secrets that shaped its legacy for decades. Friday, 1995 cast reveals what most fans never figured out.
Oh man, I'll wait till you come out.
Boy, bring your ass off up in here. What you talking about? You wait till I come out. I smelt your shit for 22 years.
In the early 1990s, Hollywood had a very particular way of showing black neighborhoods in Los Angeles. If you watched Boys in the Hood or Colors, the story was almost always the same: gangs, shootings, drugs, and tragedy. These were powerful films, no doubt, and they told truths about the struggles of South Central. But they also painted a picture that was one-sided. To outsiders, it seemed like life in the hood was nothing but violence and heartbreak. Ice Cube knew that wasn't the full story. He had grown up there. Yes, there was danger, but there was also laughter on every corner. Kids cracked jokes on the porch. Neighbors clowned each other on the street. Families celebrated birthdays, barbecues, and block parties. Cube wanted the world to see that side, too. The fun, the absurd, the everyday silliness. For him, Friday wasn't just a comedy. It was a correction. It was his way of saying, we're more than just tragedy. We laugh, too. That mission was risky, because at the time, Ice Cube was known for something completely different. He wasn't just a rapper, he was one of the angriest and most political voices in hip-hop. As a member of NWA, he wrote some of the rawest, most confrontational lyrics ever recorded. His solo albums like America's Most Wanted and Death Certificate were firestorms of rage, tackling racism, poverty, and injustice head-on. Nobody looked at Ice Cube and thought, funny guy. He was the scowling face of West Coast rap. So when he said he wanted to make a comedy, people laughed, but not in the way he wanted. They thought he was joking. Why would the man who wrote "Fuck the Police" suddenly want to write punchlines? Even some of his peers questioned his choices. They remembered when he made "It Was a Good Day," a mellow, feel-good track about cruising around without any drama. Fans loved it, but people in his circle asked, why is a hardcore rapper talking about good days? The same doubts followed him when he decided to write Friday. But Cube had a bigger vision. He called himself a reality rapper, and reality wasn't all gloom. Reality meant sometimes your cousin got fired for something stupid, or your friend smoked too much weed and started rambling nonsense, or your dad yelled at you from the bathroom while reading the newspaper. These were real experiences, too. For Cube, comedy wasn't a betrayal of his image. It was the other half of the truth. With Friday, he wanted to prove that South Central could make you laugh just as easily as it could make you cry. Turning that vision into an actual film was another story. Cube and his writing partner DJ Pooh knew what they wanted, but they didn't have Hollywood connections or big money backing them. Their plan? Do it the scrappy way, just like Robert Townsend had done with Hollywood Shuffle. Townsend had literally paid for his movie by maxing out a stack of credit cards. Cube and Pooh figured they might have to do the same. They also looked to Kevin Smith's indie hit Clerks. That movie was cheap, simple, and mostly filmed inside a convenience store. Why not do the same thing for their neighborhood? They even toyed with the idea of filming Friday in black and white, just like Clerks, to save money on lighting and production. The plan was to keep the setting small, just one block, one day, a handful of characters. The comedy would carry the weight, not fancy production. But the magic of Friday wasn't just in its budget plan. It was in how personal the story was. Almost every character and scene came straight from real life. Take Craig, the main character who gets fired on his day off for supposedly stealing boxes. That wasn't fiction. It really happened to Cube's cousin. Or Smokey, the weed-smoking, fast-talking best friend. That was based on DJ Pooh himself, who admitted he had been that guy back in the day. Debo, the terrifying neighborhood bully. He was inspired by a real dude they grew up with who'd ride around on a bike, snatching chains and intimidating everybody. Even Craig's dad, with his hilarious bathroom lectures, was pulled from the way black fathers in South Central kept their kids in line. These weren't just made-up characters. They were people Cube and Pooh knew, reshaped into comedy gold. The script felt authentic because it was, but no matter how good it was, making a movie costs money. That's when a miracle happened. New Line Cinema, the studio that had scored big with House Party, got hold of the script. They saw something fresh in it. They agreed to fund the movie. Suddenly, Cube and Pooh didn't have to max out their credit cards. Their little neighborhood story was about to be a real Hollywood film. But New Line had one big demand, one that almost killed the whole dream before it even began. The problem was Smokey. From day one, Cube and Pooh had always pictured DJ Pooh himself playing the part. It was his life, his character. He was Smokey. But when New Line Cinema looked at him, they didn't see a star. They told Cube flat out, "He's not experienced enough. You need a bigger name." That decision flipped the project upside down. If Smokey wasn't funny, the movie wouldn't work. Suddenly, Cube and Pooh were scrambling. They considered some of the biggest young comedians at the time, Chris Rock, Tommy Davidson. Both were talented, but Cube had a different gut feeling. He'd been watching a young comic named Chris Tucker tearing it up on Def Comedy Jam. Tucker wasn't famous yet, but his energy was explosive. He was loud, fast, unpredictable, and he had that hood way about him that Cube knew would fit. Cube pushed for Tucker, convinced he was the one. But when Tucker came in for his audition, it was a disaster. He'd just come off the road from stand-up gigs. He was tired, unprepared, and hadn't even read the script properly. His timing was off. His jokes fell flat. The casting director wasn't impressed. To everyone watching, Tucker looked like a mistake. New Line was ready to move on. Here's where fate stepped in. Director F. Gary Gray wasn't ready to give up. He saw something in Tucker that the others didn't, a raw spark that couldn't be faked. Gray fought hard to get Tucker another chance. And then, in a twist that feels like it came out of a movie itself, one of Tucker's future co-stars stepped in to help. Angela Means, the actress cast as Felicia, yes, the same Felicia from Bye, Felicia, invited Tucker to her house for dinner the night before his second audition. Over a plate of spaghetti, she coached him through the role, helping him find Smokey's rhythm. By the end of the meal, Tucker wasn't just Chris anymore. He was Smokey. The next day, he walked into that audition room and lit it on fire. The energy, the wild facial expressions, the hilarious delivery, it was all there. He crushed it. Everyone in the room knew it instantly. Smokey had arrived. That one breakthrough changed everything. With Tucker on board, the film suddenly had its heartbeat. His chemistry with Ice Cube was electric, and the two would go on to create one of the most iconic comedy duos of the decade. But it almost didn't happen. If not for F. Gary Gray's faith, Angela Means' spaghetti dinner, and Tucker's second chance, the Friday we know today might never have existed. For all its laughs and larger-than-life characters, Friday was made under some very real constraints. The film had a budget of less than $3 million, a shoestring number by Hollywood standards, even back in 1995. And the production schedule? Just 20 days. That's 3 short weeks to bring an entire neighborhood to life on screen. Every shot mattered, every scene had to be tight, and there was little room for mistakes. Yet somehow, under that pressure, the cast and crew captured lightning in a bottle. One reason it worked is because the cast didn't just stick to the script. Chris Tucker, in particular, brought a kind of chaotic genius to the set. He was given the freedom to riff, and his improvisation ended up shaping some of the most famous lines in the film. His high-energy ad-libs turned Smokey into more than just a character on paper. He became a living, breathing force of comedy. The beauty of it was that no one, not even Tucker himself, knew what he was going to do next. That unpredictability kept Ice Cube and the rest of the cast on their toes, and it gave the movie an authenticity that can't be faked. And then there's the moment that gave birth to a meme before memes even existed. Bye, Felicia. The line has taken on a life of its own, but most fans don't know that it wasn't planned that way. Angela Means, who played Felicia, decided in the middle of the scene to sit right between Ice Cube and Chris Tucker without warning anyone. It was a bold move. Tucker's irritation at her invading his space wasn't acting. It was real. That raw reaction is what made the scene so hilarious and what cemented Bye, Felicia into pop culture history. There are also myths about the set that need busting. Fans have long assumed that Cube and Tucker were actually smoking weed during their scenes, but Cube has been clear. It was all for show. As the producer of the film, he wanted his head clear. They faked the smoke and stayed focused. The comedy came from performance, not intoxication. The set also offered early glimpses of future stars. A 13-year-old Megan Good appears briefly as one of the kids on the block, long before her breakout roles. And if you blink, you might miss the late Michael Clark Duncan, uncredited as a craps player in a flashback scene, years before his Oscar-nominated role in The Green Mile. Despite the improvisation and chaos, the set was surprisingly professional. Ice Cube, on his first outing as a film producer, ran a tight ship. It was a balancing act, giving his actors freedom to shine while making sure every scene got shot on time and on budget. That mix of discipline and spontaneity is exactly why the finished film feels so alive. It's structured but loose, professional but real, a perfect mirror of the neighborhood it was trying to capture. When Next Friday hit theaters in 2000, fans were buzzing with excitement until they noticed one glaring problem. Smokey, the breakout star of the first film, was gone. No explanation, no cameo, not even a mention beyond a quick throwaway line. For audiences who had fallen in love with Chris Tucker's wild performance, his absence was shocking. And for years, the question hung in the air: why did Smokey disappear? The first explanation came from Ice Cube himself. According to him, Chris Tucker had been offered a massive payday to return, somewhere between $10 and $12 million. But Tucker turned it down. The reason? Religion. By then, Tucker had become a devout Christian and reportedly no longer wanted to curse or smoke weed on screen. Since Smokey did both constantly, Tucker felt he couldn't in good conscience play the part anymore. To Cube, it was simple. Tucker's faith got in the way. Tucker, however, told a slightly different story. Yes, the weed scenes were a factor, but for him, it wasn't just about religion. It was about responsibility. Friday had become a phenomenon, and Tucker was uncomfortable with the idea that he was encouraging people to get high. He didn't want to be remembered only as the weed guy. He also said he was never a fan of sequels. His philosophy was to do a great job on one movie, then move on to something new. Staying away from Next Friday, he believed, would push him to take on fresh challenges. Then came a third explanation from John Witherspoon, the veteran comedian who played Craig's dad. Witherspoon believed the truth was somewhere in the middle. Yes, preachers and religious mentors had told Tucker to avoid movies that glorified drugs. But at the same time, Tucker's career was exploding. By the time Next Friday was filming, Tucker was already gearing up for the Rush Hour franchise, where he would make $20 million a film. As Witherspoon joked, "For that kind of money, I wouldn't have come back either." Whatever the exact reason, Tucker's decision left a massive hole in the franchise. Smokey wasn't just a sidekick. He was the spark that ignited the first film. Without him, Next Friday had to find new energy in Mike Epps' character Day Day, who brought his own brand of chaos but couldn't quite replicate the chemistry of Cube and Tucker. Fans felt the difference. Smokey's absence was more than just one character missing. It was the loss of the heart of the original. For years, the polite explanations, religion, weed, sequels, were enough to keep fans satisfied. But behind the scenes, there was another layer to the story, one that most people never heard. Ice Cube and Chris Tucker, the duo that made Friday unforgettable, had fallen out. The tension, according to those close to the production, was about credit. Tucker's improvisation had shaped so many of Smokey's iconic moments. From his manic rambling to his hilarious expressions, much of what people quoted from the movie wasn't in the script. It was Tucker off the cuff. Fans loved him for it, and some even claimed he was the reason the movie became a classic. For Cube, though, Friday was his baby. He had co-written the script with DJ Pooh, fought for financing, and produced the film. To him, Tucker was a brilliant performer, but the vision and structure belonged to Cube. That clash over who deserved credit for the film's success quietly drove a wedge between them. There's even an Easter egg that hints at the feud. In the opening of Next Friday, there's a line that takes a jab at people trying to take credit for writing the first one. Many believe this was Cube's subtle shot at Tucker, a way of putting his stamp on the franchise and reminding everyone where the story came from. The disagreement never turned into a public war of words, but it was enough to end their partnership. Cube moved on with new cast members and sequels. Tucker became an international star with Rush Hour. And the iconic duo that had made Friday a cultural phenomenon never worked together again. For fans, it looked like a business decision, but in reality, it was the quiet end of a friendship and the beginning of a mystery that would hang over the franchise for decades. When fans talk about Friday, they often remember the jokes first, but what lingers even more is the cast of unforgettable characters. Sadly, many of those actors are no longer with us. Each loss hit hard, leaving empty chairs at every reunion and a bittersweet shadow over the legacy of the film. John Witherspoon, better known to Friday fans as Pops, was the movie's secret weapon. With his bathroom lectures and no-nonsense delivery, he brought fatherly wisdom and comic timing to every scene. Off-screen, Witherspoon was already a comedy legend, having worked alongside Richard Pryor and David Letterman in the 1960s and 70s. But Friday introduced him to a new generation. Later, he became beloved again as Granddad on the Boondocks. Still, he once revealed that the main actors in Friday were paid only about $5,000 each, a shockingly small sum given the movie's iconic status. Witherspoon passed away in 2019 at the age of 77, but his presence as Pops is still one of the beating hearts of the franchise. Then there was Tommy Tiny Lister Jr., the man who terrified audiences as Debo. With his huge frame, bulging eye, and menacing growl, Debo was the kind of neighborhood bully who haunted everyone's childhood. Yet, off-camera, Lister was known as a gentle soul with a kind heart. Before acting, he had been a college shot put champion and even wrestled professionally under the name Zeus, famously feuding with Hulk Hogan. He passed away in 2020 at 62 from heart disease. Ice Cube called him America's favorite bully and remembered him as someone who loved people, despite playing one of the most feared characters in cinema. Another devastating loss came much earlier. Bernie Mac, who played Pastor Clever in Friday, went on to become one of the greatest comedians of his era. His quick cameo as the shady pastor was a taste of the brilliance he would later show in the original Kings of Comedy and The Bernie Mac Show. Tragically, Mac died in 2008 at only 50 years old from complications related to sarcoidosis, an autoimmune disease. His death left a hole not just in the Friday family, but in comedy itself. And then there was Anthony A.J. Johnson, unforgettable as Ezal, the clumsy thief who couldn't even fake a fall without making you laugh. Johnson had a rough life, battling addiction and financial troubles even as fans quoted his lines for decades. He passed away in 2021 at 55 from multi-organ failure linked to long-term alcohol use. For many, his death was a reminder of how brutally short and unpredictable life can be. Together, these losses weigh heavily. The thought of a Friday reunion without Pops, Debo, Pastor Clever, and Ezal is heartbreaking. Their chairs will remain empty, but their laughs and characters live on forever in the film. The comedy they brought to the screen wasn't just entertainment, it was a gift. Not everyone from Friday is gone. Many of its stars are still here, carrying scars, triumphs, and surprising twists in their journeys. Some became global icons, while others fought personal battles behind the scenes. Regina King, who played Craig's no-nonsense little sister Dana, has perhaps had the most glittering career of anyone in the cast. From TV hits like 207 to Oscar-winning performances in If Beale Street Could Talk, she became one of Hollywood's most respected talents. She has also directed episodes of major shows and stood as a trailblazer for Black women in film. But alongside her career highs came unimaginable tragedy. In 2022, her only son Ian took his own life at just 26. King has spoken of her grief as a love with no place to go, and fans across the world rallied around her. Nia Long, who played Craig's love interest Debbie, was already known from Boys in the Hood and The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. After Friday, she cemented herself as an icon of black cinema with films like Love Jones, Soul Food, and The Best Man. Decades later, she continues to thrive and is set to play Katherine Jackson, the mother of Michael Jackson, in an upcoming biopic. Her journey shows the staying power of Friday's cast. Then there's Angela Means, the woman who gave us Bye, Felicia. What should have been her biggest break became a double-edged sword. The line turned into one of the most famous memes of all time, but it also brought her years of harassment. Strangers would shout insults at her, conflating her with Felicia, the dirty neighbor. She's spoken about the emotional toll, but also about reclaiming her story. Today, she runs a vegan restaurant in Los Angeles called Jackfruit Cafe, focusing on healing and resilience. Ice Cube, of course, used Friday as a springboard to build an empire. His production company, Cube Vision, has delivered hits like The Barbershop and Ride Along franchises. He's acted, produced, directed, and continued making music. What started as a gamble to show the fun side of his neighborhood turned into a multi-decade career in Hollywood. And then there's Chris Tucker. After Friday, he rocketed to superstardom with Jackie Chan in the Rush Hour trilogy, at one point becoming the highest-paid actor in the world. But then he pulled back. Tucker turned down countless roles, choosing only projects that aligned with his values. It left fans puzzled, but also added to his mystique. From wild Smokey to global star to selective recluse, his path has been one of the most unexpected in Hollywood. The survivors of Friday carry both triumph and tragedy. They've built careers, endured personal losses, and found new ways to define themselves. But no matter where life has taken them, their time on that porch in South Central will always be part of their story. For decades, fans have begged for one last Friday movie. Ice Cube has wanted it too. But for more than 20 years, the project was stuck in limbo, caught in a battle between Cube and Warner Brothers over who controlled the rights. DJ Pooh once described it bluntly. The franchise was held hostage by studio executives who didn't understand the culture behind the movies. For Cube, it wasn't just about money, it was about respect. He felt Warner Brothers didn't value the authenticity that made Friday special. They wanted creative control, but Cube refused to let outsiders reshape the story he and Pooh had lived. As a result, every time fans asked him about a sequel, Cube gave the same answer. It's not happening, at least not the way it should. Meanwhile, the demand never went away. Fans kept pushing on social media, at concerts, in interviews. Memes like "Bye, Felicia" kept the movie alive for new generations. For a long time, it seemed like last Friday would remain nothing more than a dream. But then, in 2025, something shifted. Warner Brothers changed leadership, and suddenly, the conversations that had stalled for decades started moving again. Finally, a deal was struck. Ice Cube announced that he would write and star in the fourth and final film. Last Friday, the news was huge, but what really shocked fans was the next revelation. After decades of absence, Chris Tucker was expected to return as Smokey. The duo that defined the first movie would be back together at last. The reunion, though, will be bittersweet. Pops, Debo, Ezel, Pastor Clever. Those seats will forever be empty. The final film won't just be another comedy. It will be a tribute. A way to celebrate the laughs, honor the legends who paved the way, and close the story properly. What began as a low-budget experiment in 1995 is now set to end as a cultural landmark. The fight to finish the saga wasn't easy. It took 20 years of frustration, lawsuits, and waiting. But when Last Friday finally arrives, it will stand as more than just a sequel. It will be a victory for creativity, authenticity, and the fans who never stopped believing.